Recording. Hello, everybody. Welcome to 2021, our first meeting this year. This is SIG API Machinery, and I'm glad to see everybody. I hope everybody is doing well and staying safe. We have 3 items in the agenda today. I think we are going to slightly change the order because David is delayed. So probably we can start with Han and move to that.
Great, awesome. Yeah, so the thing that I want to talk about is promoting API server metrics to stable status. So metrics now have a stability level, and we are now basically ready to enforce API guarantees on critical metrics. So for API machinery, there are some pretty obvious candidates. Stuff like API server request totals and latencies. And we can't really delete these things without breaking everybody who manages a Kubernetes cluster. So we would like to promote them, but before we promote those metrics, we would actually like, I would like to remove a few fields which have been problematic. So there are two suggestions here. So one is, I will make a.
Do you want to present, or do you want me to present for you?
Oh, can you just scroll up, or scroll to January 27th? Wait, what? Am I not showing?
You're not.
Yeah, your document doesn't seem to be live.
What is going on here?
Because I've got the document open also, and it looks quite different now. Yeah, I think you're showing a cache version or something.
Oh, my connection is super weird. What?
Don't mind us, just some technical difficulties here.
Really? You can't see it?
We can see your changes. We just can't see the presented. Like if you open the doc in a separate tab, it's happening.
Oh, I'm not actually presenting. I think it was Fede.
Yeah, it was Fede presenting.
Yes.
Fede's thing has worked.
Yeah, I stopped presenting because I didn't know if you wanted to present. I can present again.
Fine. There are a couple. So is everyone okay with the general idea of promoting this one and etcd object counts to a stable status? These have been in Kubernetes for quite a long time, and basically we would get a lot of pushback if we did anything drastic to these things already. So they're like kind of already non-officially stable. I don't hear any objections. It shouldn't be that contentious. So like the thing I would like to do is open up a PR. I'm going to remove some labels that we've had problems with in the past. And yeah, I guess I can just CC all the leads from API machinery and just make sure it gets done in 121. But do you have concerns? You look like you wanted to say something, Daniel.
So I was just, you want to remove some labels from the metrics before
Yes.
promoting them to stable? Okay.
Yes.
What are they right now? Are they alpha or
they
beta?
Are alpha.
Okay. If somebody's using these metrics, what happens? Those fields just stop having values, or does it break a monitoring pipeline?
They do, but it's quite the ones that I would like to remove could not have been used in very meaningful ways due to cardinality issues in the past. In fact, we had to modify a lot of these values due to security concerns over the past like couple quarters. So people will probably be happy about us.
What did you want to do to the etcd object counts metric?
We want to, yeah, so the etcd object counts doesn't conform to instrumentation metric guidelines. So SIG instrumentation people have requested that we call it storage object counts, for API server storage object counts.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like an improvement. Is that it? You just want to change the name?
Yeah, well, I'm going to deprecate this one so that doesn't break. I'm going to, yeah. And then I'm going to just create a new one, and then we will just delete this in 2 cycles.
Okay. And presumably that's permitted by our
it is permitted.
Metrics.
It is permitted. Exactly. And everyone gets the appropriate amount of time to transition over to this new one.
My guess is that most people in SIG API Machinery are not direct consumers of these, or maybe we might have some.
No,
Did you mention this in SIG instrumentation?
I did. Yeah. We talked about it in SIG instrumentation. That's why I'm here in a dual capacity.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anybody on the call have opinions, input?
So removing labels is a breaking change. Do you need to make any announcement about that?
Yeah. We're definitely going to have a release note. The funny thing is you have to think about label. It's helpful to think about labels like columns in an SQL table. So if a client tries to write a row in a table with a column that doesn't exist, it's going to error out. But you can have nullable columns, and basically time series operates like that. So if you remove labels, it's from the client, it's actually compatible with backend storage representation of that time series.
It's not compatible with query.
Not if people depend on it, yes. But the thing is, the ones that I am suggesting that we remove are ones that could not have been used in meaningful ways in queries to begin with.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. But we need to publicize it. Yeah, I definitely an email to the API Machinery mailing list and maybe Kubernetes Dev. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That's good. I will do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. That's it for me.
All right. Cool. Thanks. Let's see. Looks like David is not on yet, and David was going to run the KEPS item. What do you think, Fede? Do you want to run can you run the KEPS item, or should we shuffle it to the end?
I could also do my demo, and then like people could stew on it for a little bit. And if David's there, we could do the KEPS, and then we could have the discussion afterwards, because the discussion will probably take longer too. Up to you.
I like that.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Yeah. Okay, so I will start presenting so you can present, Soli.
Let me just switch to my. Hi. So. Great. Let's see. Can y'all should see terminal
Looks
with
good.
stuff in it?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So I just wanted to give a quick demo of just like real quick go over the IDLs and just like some of the tooling that I've written so far. So you can see I have like kind of a subsection that I've of Core V1 that I've handwritten for to be a useful example. This is the example that's actually in the like in the KEP. I've actually like auto converted all of Core V1, but you know Core V1's a little bit unwieldy, so I figured I'd just show the interesting parts. For people who haven't read the KEP, you can see like everything is grouped around like a group version kind or a group version, and then like some sort of subtype that you can use or reuse in that. We have documentation comments and normal comments, and then we have kind of primitives and compound types for all of the types in our kind of Platonic Kubernetes type system, as it were. So list maps and lists and sets, and then like the primitives that we use, so like integers and strings and quantities, time, duration, all that jazz. And then we have ways to map to the currently to the Open API validation, and we might be able to expand that to support maybe some of the simple cases for the built-in validation for KK, as that's one of the open points. And then we have, of course, we also have like first-class contracts for enums. This should make some of our documentation a little bit better, and unions, which we kind of have defined informally a lot in Kubernetes, and have been a common feature request for CRD authors as a way to like match the behavior of Kubernetes of stuff like volume source and friends. Okay, so basically, the tool chain kind of theoretically consists of this front end KDLC, which compiles that kind of source IDL that you saw into a compiled and type checked representation that is it's a proto message. So other tooling can import that in whatever language or whatever they're written in and generate stuff off of it. So for today, I'll show you the mechanism that generates CRDs. It was a quick port from controller tools, the same underlying mechanism except without the Go front end, and then also kind of the sketch of the version that converts to like our Go pseudo IDL style. I say style because I'll talk about that in a moment. But basically, we can specify an import path and a file. And this is just going to do that compilation. And it's also just for us to check it's going to spit out like a text form. This is mainly just for the demo. Oops. I made it have actual argument flags last night, and then okay. So it worked. You can kind of see like this is the text proto form in the final version. Obviously, this probably wouldn't be spit out, but it's kind of useful for debugging. You can see just we have a lovely blob of proto here. So the internals of this are kind of roughly correspond to what you would expect from seeing the IDL text, but it's a little bit easier to process. And then we can feed this into our consuming tooling. So if we do like IR to CRD, and then we do core v1 : pod, we'll just convert the pod kind. We can see we end up with like what you'd expect from a schema, including all of our appropriate extension points. Notice that like the user didn't necessarily need to manually specify list type on their list map. It's just because it's a list map, we generate that because we have a first class concept of that. We generate proper validation for the enum. And as you'll see in a minute, we'll also, when we generate Go, we'll also generate constants. This is actually something that we don't do today by default. Currently, like if users do like a kind of one of our pseudo IDL style enums, they have to also manually copy the values over and specify them in a marker. And then we generated this giant blob of Open API. That's what's required to get a tagged union, Kubernetes style tagged union working in our restricted Open API variant. All right, and then I also have, I added this part to the demo very recently, so with any luck, it still works. I just recently ported it from my prototype. But we can see we get kind of Kubernetes style pseudo IDL out of this. Is roughly one-to-one compatible with the Kubernetes Go pseudo IDL. I say roughly because the proto markers in pseudo IDL are full of kind of nonsense. Like there's a bunch of values in that proto struct tag that are just completely ignored by the proto to or the go to protobuf parser, and some of them contain just like nonsense, like they're marked as repeated when it's actually not a slice or whatever. And so it's, you know, it's hard to get one-to-one compatibility with that, but otherwise it's one-to-one compatible. Okay, that's kind of my demo. I guess we can switch over to the KEPs maybe, or if anyone has any questions, if we want to stall for a little bit longer.
Sally, did you cover why, like at a meta level, like could you talk a little bit about like why IDL, like make the simplest possible case for inventing something new versus, you know, code or other things, like, because I think that's what I struggle with reading the KEP. Like the desire is strong, right? We want to represent exactly what we represent. And for every edge case, we either have to work around it or get over the hump. That puts a lot of burdens on a language, but it makes code more palatable. Is the argument that the IDL is the true goal, or is it like because it's simpler for end users, even though it has to encode all that complexity? Like why IDL?
Yeah, so I think this is on one of my main points, which is end users. I think that right now there's a lot to know, and there's a lot of complexity that you kind of have to keep in your head when you're writing in pseudo IDL. There's a lot of weird stuff that you can't, and there's a lot of stuff from Go that you can't use. And this is causing issues for our end users, whether it's people familiar with Kubernetes, but that just like make mistakes, or want to encode things that we don't necessarily make easy to encode from kind of a CRD perspective, or whether it's new users coming to Kubernetes that want to write extensions and have like all this extra burden of like a lot of the weird stuff that's unwieldy and doesn't really map well. And then especially for users that are coming to Kubernetes and they're not writing Go, right? They're writing stuff like CRDs for meta controller, and their backend is Python. For a lot of them, like getting an entire Go toolchain in place and set up is like not a great experience. You know, and I've had people tell me like, you know, I don't like, I'd be willing to write, I've actually had people say this, I'd be willing to write an IDL or like a small domain specific language, but like, you know, saying we have to learn Go in order to write this thing is just like, that's out of the question. And so that's like the main idea. And then one of the reasons this comes back to affect KK, you know, besides it being potentially nice for various review reasons, is that a lot of what people do today with their extensions is kind of write these wrapper CRDs. So think of these as like custom workload types. And so one of the things that they commonly do is they will embed built-in types into their CRDs. And so if we have two separate systems between core and extensions, we end up with this tooling drift that is kind of detrimental. So whether it's being able to easily understand what the types in core are doing, to core making changes that actually end up breaking CRDs. This is something that has happened in the past that has like led to KEPs to kind of fix what we screwed up in core. Like that kind of tooling drift causes issues today because we have slightly different tool chains, and separating them even further would kind of continue to cause these issues.
Yeah, I mean, and I think like a lot of the questions that I had in the KEP really came down to, this is still building something new that has to be converted to all the existing other things, right? Like the API that we publicly support for CRDs is our open API logical schema. If you want to use this IDL, there has to be a mapping from that open API schema to this IDL to then do other generation. So you'd effectively either say, we don't want to support the full range of all APIs and therefore not every CRD can participate, or we take the APIs we already do support and treat them as our IDL, even if they're ineffective or insufficient. But we're still building something net new that has to have relatively high fidelity to every other tool that we've already built. And that, to me, like that's the thing at the heart of this, is we've added one more thing that stacks to every other thing that then everything has to be adapted to. Like from a scaling perspective, if we were starting fresh, I would get it, but I'm a little worried. Like that's the IDL is something new. We have a bunch of existing things. The proposals bar in Cube to some degree, like I might argue the bar we have to clear is why does one more thing make the whole problem better and reduce the work that we're still going to have to go do to adapt all the existing tools to it? Not that I against it, just like that's the argument I feel.
So
I kind of agree with that. I have if we did something like this, my desire would be that we auto convert all existing Kubernetes stuff into this, so that we would not be adding an additional thing, which means it has to be exactly one-to-one, right? Like everything that we do in Kubernetes types.go files has to be expressible in this. Otherwise, it can't be a replacement, right? But if this is like adding an additional step or adding an additional way to do things to the system, I don't think that's good, because we already have too many ways to do it, right? Like server-side apply has its own notion of a schema. We have the types.go notion of a schema. We have the open API subset notion of a schema. Like it is not good to add an additional one. We have to replace something.
yeah, so I can maybe kind of speak to both of those points. Kind of to a couple of Clayton's points, this like I tried to design this to represent the range of open API schemas that can be expressed. There are places that you could maybe write like open API that is not expressible in this. If you wrote open API by hand, those are like very, very edge cases. And those are also not supported in controller tools, which is by and large what most people writing extensions.
Yeah, if I can interrupt for a second, I don't know that looking at open API is the thing to go, because that's what we expose to CRDs, but that's not what Clayton and I and David, if you were here, are worried about. We're actually worried about reproducing the behavior in our existing types.go.
Okay.
Right. Like open API is downstream from that.
Yeah. Clayton mentioned open API, so I figured I'd very briefly touch on that.
So sorry, that's a big statement. I don't know that I have the data to agree or disagree with that statement, but that one's a big statement that controller tools is what people use to build CRDs. So I'd want, like, I think that's a factor. And, you know, we want to drive consolidation around tooling. So that's a pro to more centralized tooling. But I do want to make sure that that statement is, if it's used as evidence that we establish like that, because like the set of people this would impact, the different diverse audiences like core cube, people using controller tools, people in other languages, people who aren't using controller tools, people who wouldn't touch, don't know that controller tools exist. We do need to be relatively accurate about what that audience is. So if we have that data, that's great. That would probably be something I'll ask for in the CAP.
Yeah, I can see what I can do there. I have that data in various forms. The other kind of side of this for KK, I definitely agree. I actually, as part of the earlier iteration of this, prototype that I wrote, I have the tool that auto converts, and it is 100% my goal to have the auto conversion be available, and B, like, I think, we should auto convert. We should cover all of Kubernetes, right? Like, this shouldn't. I would like to, like you said, consolidate tooling, and not introduce a new thing. I think gradually replace everything, or that sounds like conquer the world. No, I want to, I don't want to add a new thing. I want this to replace pseudo IDL as the canonical thing. Obviously, we'll still have to generate Go types from the IDL because we want to use stuff in Go. But like, this should be the source of truth. And ideally, we end up replacing our tooling that works on pseudo IDL today to work based on the, taking the intermediate form that I showed you, the CKDL, and use that instead. And for practical purposes of migration, kind of doing that incrementally is probably better, instead of trying to, say, like, publish everything at once. We can start saying, okay, we generate the equivalent pseudo IDL, and everything continues to work. We replace one tool, or we migrate one tool. We keep migrating tools.
So,
yeah, I agree with the people in chat who are mentioning the XKCD standards. It sounded like Dims. Was that you going to say something?
No, I was just making an observation, Daniel. It's like, yeah, especially coming through, the web services stuff where we were trying to do code generation and back and forth and stuff like that. The mismatch between the object and the serialized representations have always traditionally bit us in the past, right? So that's why I haven't read the KEP yet. So I will promise to read the KEP. Sorry, and I will give some feedback there.
And Sully, I guess like the follow-up to the second question would be, if for whatever reason the folks balk at the scope or scale or complexity of this, what's the fallback for the IDL? Is it something that the folks working around the controller runtimes project would be fine experimenting with? I mean, you could do 100% fidelity and still not be something that we take on in basic in core Kubernetes without more evidence or more feedback. What's the scenario? What are the different branching paths here where for one reason or another we may or may not decide to go whole hog? What are the smaller steps?
Taking this back to KubeBuilder, like, I think that would be a disappointing outcome because of what I mentioned, and I talk about a little bit in the KEP too, the kind of tooling drift, and it also means more maintenance burden. Like, collectively, we maintain like tooling for 2 dialects of pseudo IDL, in addition to like a lot of supporting parsing code. And I think it would be a shame to just be like, okay, we're going to continue maintaining 2 different sets of tooling as well. And I mentioned about the users and stuff like that as well, and the learning. But that is definitely, that could be a viable outcome. I demoed this to the rest of the KubeBuilder community, and they were interested. So like, we could take it back to KubeBuilder to experiment with. I have a little bit of a concern there too, that like, we might end up drifting further under that scenario. But
so I have some thoughts around the feature set. I noticed one of your demo had a union concept in it, but we don't actually support unions. Like we have in theory how you would do a union, but unions are not a feature of our API surface area. And so I so in order to replace our types.go, like clearly you need to support every feature that we currently do have. But I'm fairly concerned about supporting features that we don't yet have. So I would actually like to see it not support that until it is a possibility in the system, right? Like I want the system to support the feature, and then like we add it to the IDL, and then everybody gets to use the feature.
What is volume source then? Like how do you describe volume source?
I mean, it's hacked together in code, right? It is not a type. It is not a type type system feature.
I mean, you can write the equivalent Open API.
So, but the issue is like Open API is a downstream artifact of our system. It is a description that's not entirely accurate about what the system does. So like I think you're going to it like a canonical source for behavior, and it's just not that. Would it be better if it were? Maybe, probably, but it isn't, right? So you can say things in Open API that don't necessarily correspond to what the validation routines do.
Okay,
so that's,
I mean,
that's my concern.
I would not want, I would not want Union to sink the proposal. I will put that out there. But I will also communicate that like one of the very common current requests that I get, as a controller tools maintainer, as a KubeBuilder maintainer is like, how do I write stuff like volume source in my CRD, right? And like people point out, hey, I could write the Open API by hand to get that effect. But they, they say I would like a higher level, like I would like a representation where I can write something that looks like what we write in Kubernetes, right? Like I want to write volume source and mark it as a.
And I think that's a important feature, and it is on our list in the. It's probably up after immutable fields, right? It's on our list, but I don't know that adding it to the description language without actually making the system support it is, yeah, if that makes sense.
And I didn't know for this in the CAP, but I think it kind of weighs on that whole, we have a lot of things that have to keep working, and we have pragmatic things that we've been chasing for a while. So like managed fields took a long time, and we're still, working through the implications of managed fields. We've got the go protobuf disaster happening in slow motion. Certainly we wanted to add validation and defaulting to the descriptive language for a while. I was kind of hoping, like, independent of whether an IDL is the correct solution or not, a more accurate upstream source of truth that could be attached to one or multiple of the objectives without all the others having to be attached is a desirable thing. But one of the concerns I think I have about changing too much at once is refactoring for getting where we are, like back to where we are, but with a cleaner structure doesn't have a lot of appeal for me personally. I mean, there would be like, I don't want to discourage that anyway. It's just, so like trying to think through making the case for a big change like this. It has to feel incremental. It has to have it has to accomplish things that we can't accomplish today in the core. It has to hopefully free up time. I mean, anything that's net positive developer time is a win. One of the challenges I think we've historically had is a lot of the net wins have been for individuals like outside, and then the core contributors basically still have the same like backlogs. So we've done a lot to democratize. Maybe one of the angles here, and this is partially why I asked Solly about like it being a KubeBuilder thing first, is there's nothing more democratizing than broad communities that have different sets of problems than the core being able to take advantage of it. I don't consider that a failure in any domain. Like experimentation is valuable. It's just tough, like looking at the list of things in the core backlog that could be magically solved by this, that don't involve, and then we'll go do a bunch of work and change all the existing stuff and get back to where we were. So it's like finding ways for the IDL to take on and help us solve new problems would be one angle that I might recommend exploring in the KEP, and I think you do, validation, defaulting, but then omitting things that we may not want to chase, like unions, also has an angle.
Yeah, I have okay, we should probably time box this in one more minute. I have a slightly different take on that, which is like just in the interest of integrating this into the API server, like I would like an integration mechanism that is a lot of work for Solly and not work for anybody else. Which means like if the first step is like no features at all, but it also doesn't break us or make our lives harder, then that's fine. Right? I'm fine with some pre-factoring. We don't have to get to like additional features immediately in the first step. Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, should we go on to the KEPs and just do this without David? Clearly, we'll have to come back to this topic in the future. So the KEP is out there, and please go read it and comment. Let's see. Fede, do you want to present the list of KEPs?
So, sure. Which one do you want me to present? We have our internal document and we have the official spreadsheet. I think we can go into the spreadsheet, maybe. That is more.
Yeah. Sorry for our disorganization. I think David had something to present, but
yeah,
it sounds like he had something come up.
No worries. I
just mention something really quick while you get that ready?
Yes.
So a couple SIG meetings ago, we showed that we have a KEP for adding apply support to client Go as like a typed, like an actual apply call with a type that you pass in as an argument. We have working prototypes for that people can experiment with. I've added it to the agenda here, and I will paste a link into chat for people that want it. We are looking for people to try it out. There's a document explaining how to try it out, and then we're gonna there's a survey that you can fill out when you're done. We're hoping to get feedback by the 5th so we can feed it into this KEP cycle. But yeah, anybody uses server-side apply, anybody uses client Go. We're also going to have a KubeBuilder one ready shortly. We'd really like to get you to try out the different variants of this potential solution we have and get your feedback.
Okay.
Thanks.
No problem. And okay, Daniel, do you want us to try to do the KEPs?
Yeah, let's go through it real quick. I think you can even put I think it's okay to, I don't think the spreadsheet has all the ones that we were talking about in it yet.
Yeah.
I've added a couple, but not all of them. I think it's okay to project the document that David started.
The one that is called stuff we want to do.
Yeah, that one.
This is how we manage the SIG.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we went through outstanding KEPs, and well, maybe I should call them pending KEPs. I guess it's up to the reader to judge if they're outstanding or just ordinary KEPs. We went through the KEPs and came up with some that we think we want, and we left others, and we tracked down some people, etc. So I think we should just talk through them. It is quite a lot of stuff. I think we're gonna be okay. But yeah, let's talk about it. Server side apply to GA. I think Antoine is on top of that. I don't think we need to say too much about it. The next one on that topic is the first, the A under that is the KEP that Joe just mentioned. And I put a link in there. Yeah. So please go take a look at that. Joe, I think you're going to send a survey out.
Yep. Okay. And on the I'll link to that as well here on this line. But yeah, there's instructions on how to try it out, and then we also have a build survey.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and the plan is to get something merged for the next release, right?
Yeah, we have working code. So once we get, I mean, basically the main unresolved question is like how we represent the applied configuration. Once we get feedback on that, I hope to basically get consensus. The KEP it's provisional with the only unresolved being that one particular issue.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. We should probably go a little faster here. Yeah. Okay. So we'll get that in the list. Next is the KEP on omit managed fields. People want the server to not send that to clients. There's actually some pushback on that from Jordan. Is like, yeah, it seems mostly cosmetic. I don't know. It adds a little bit of bandwidth. Yeah, so I'm actually not sure where we are on that one. I haven't looked into it recently. But I think I was thinking about that we would do it. If anyone has thoughts, please go type them up on that one. Built-in API types defaults. I actually don't know what the status of that one is. Is Antoine on the call?
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay. All right, but we want it. Skip backend TLS verification. I believe that's actually SIG auth. We don't need to discuss it here. Efficient watch resumption. I confirm that Wojciech is going to continue to push on that. That's basically the one where API server sends a bookmark to watch clients before it shuts down. Namespace labels. That is a very tiny amount of code. It's like 100 comments or something on a KEP for like 5 lines of code or something. But I think we've been convinced and it is approved, and I think I even put it in the list already. Yeah, so there's that one. Requiring transition from beta. I think we're working on some email to announce so everybody knows exactly what is getting deprecated and when, even though that's been published in many places already. Just don't want any surprises. Page list queries. This is a good one, actually. Clayton, are you planning on doing any work on this?
Does it just need to get to GA?
Yeah, I think there was a pending question about like pagination doesn't work out of the watch cache, and I think David's position, which I agree with, is that it's been the way it has been for like 10 releases or something ridiculous. So we should just call it GA because we're clearly not going to do anything about it.
So Wojciech and I had a quick chat on that. I mean, my well-known long-term hatred for the watch cache as a special thing versus as something more fundamental is well documented. And then there's the open question about semantics and what semantic flexibility we have to preserve. I think in practice, client, like we're already well and truly, the kids in college, and we've done all we can in the sense of if we change any semantics now, regardless of whether it's beta or not, it's going to break the world. So it's effectively GA. I'll go through and do a follow-up and chat with. I'll canvas folks who've had comments over the years just to make sure there's nothing outstanding.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Next two, I think we're just paperwork. We don't need to dwell on those. Client Go, that's also paperwork. API server tracing. I took an action item on that one. There's a PR out that is rather large and has a lot of dependencies. And I would appreciate any assistance on that. Yeah, I think this is it. Yeah, it's quite large. And I think that's the last one that we need to go through. I think I took care of all the others. So yeah, that's the KEP list. Does anybody on the call have one that we missed that we should include?
I had an open question on network proxy. We said that we API Machinery were not planning to do anything for 121 so far, but I saw that Andrew marked it as 121. So I think Andrew is not in the call, but I don't know if anybody knows if SIG Cloud Provider or somebody else is planning to actually graduate this one.
I don't know.
I can reach out to Andrew. I have this one.
Yeah, Chao's on the call. Do you know Chao?
Your sound is
Sounds
terrible.
like you're underwater talking through a tin can.
Now, I'm saying I think Walter also. I remember I talked to Walter about this. He didn't say cloud provider SIG has want to do anything for 121. So
Okay. Okay, so no plans at the moment. All right, thank you. All right, I think that's it.
So the homework for us, the SIG leadership, is to actually make
Yeah,
this list match the GitHub query that doesn't match today. Like put the proper milestones.
Yeah, so I think now you can go back to that spreadsheet. Yeah, so apparently there's some new process, and we have to make sure that everything that we want to do is on this list. So I don't think it's all there yet.
No, there is only 8, and we have 10 on the list. And yeah, I don't know if the 8 are exactly the match of the ones from the.
Yeah, I started to update the spreadsheet, and I got 1 on it, and then I got distracted a couple days ago. So we've still got a few more days before it is final, so we should be fine.
Okay.
All right, should we give everybody a few minutes back?
We do. I want to thank Soli for presenting today and the discussion. Probably we will have to do a follow-up. I know David also wanted to be part of that, but he couldn't join today. So, well, I'm glad to see everybody, and I hope you are staying safe and doing well. We'll see you next time. Okay? Thank you so much.
See you next time.
See you next time.
See you, everyone. Have a good one.